the whole sovereignty piece behind the scenes at the G7 this week. All the big frontier teams and the Trump admin, all the people fighting, the Amadeus, the Altmans, Hassabis isn't he's kind of sidelined to this. They were all in the same room pitching the idea of a US-led AI coalition to shape the industry, rules, standards, etc. The same day, funny enough, China's foreign minister repitched, because he said the same thing about a year ago, repitched the same idea, but with a global AI coalition instead open to everybody rather than just the US and friends. So question to you both. Of course, the US is leading AI. Everybody knows this, but how should Europe think? How should European leaders respond to this? Joe, I don't know if you've got any ideas on this one.
This is a big topic.
One.
It's a
big, hairy, scary one.
It's a big, scary one. I'm not a policymaker. Europe has to get a front seat at the conversation for sure. So, we're used to in Europe talking ourselves down all the time, but this is something we really can't afford to not be at the front of. So I think less these days about US versus Europe versus China, particularly the US, Europe. If you look on the ground, you see technology and talent and capital moving.
It's a continuation, isn't it?
Yeah, it really isn't us or them. It really is, something starts here and goes there, something starts there and goes here, much faster and easier than it used to. And some of that is rules have changed about that, but also some of that is just how networked we are. If you build an attractive piece of tech, everybody knows about it really fast.
Yeah, it's global. Yeah,
it's gone global. So I worry less about will those things flow around naturally, but certainly on the policy side, I think we should be part of any coalition that starts, and probably ideally it involves everyone.
I hope so. Mads, you got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the old deal seems to have changed. There was a deal between Europe and the US, which was sort of along the lines of, we're happy for the US to be the leader and to be dominant, and the US is happy to support Europe and give us a seat at the table because we'll give market access to European companies. Everybody wins. And that seems to have changed a little bit, especially with the current administration, which has a slightly more sort of might is right attitude, and where there's sort of been a view that, you really have to carry your own weight. And so you could argue both sides of that. But I think what it means for Europe is we have to wake up and just accept that if we don't have the capacity to stand our own 2 feet, we're not going to get a seat at the table. And so, Joe, to your points earlier, we have to build good products. It's not enough that we are just saying, great US companies, we have wonderful markets here, we'll let you sell your stuff, and in return, you're gonna listen to what we say. We actually have to compete and be the best at doing stuff. And I mean, it feels a little bit transparent, this idea, this alliance that's being proposed here by Darren Amodei, and I think he had Demis Hassabis in the room. I don't know if Demis is really part of this or not, or whether he was just invited along.
He tends to step sideways, right? He tends to not get involved in this kind of political stuff. But I guess he feels very strongly about how AI is applied in the real world. So maybe that's part of the key.
I mean, let's steelman what people are doing. They're sort of saying, look, there are really 2 different ways of thinking in the world. There are some allied democracies, and they should have the frontier chips, and they should work together to make sure that AI and the best AI is available to democratic countries, sort of Western countries. And that seems plausible. It makes sense. I think if you look at the steelman on the other side of why this may not be such a good idea, is that China is really leading in open weight and open weight models, and you can't really embargo them. And the risk is if you try to embargo, if you try to contain China in this way, they're going to build their own ecosystem. They already are dominant in open source, and it just creates an even more formidable competitor to the US. So the US ends up losing, and then you may fragment the kind of the tech stacks underneath. So I think if you are Anthropic and looking at this, you're probably thinking, look, it's great if I can have fewer rivals, that's good for me. But I just wonder whether long term it will work. And quite what Europe would get out of it, I don't know. I mean, we're dependent on the US for the frontier models, and we're dependent on China for open source models. So what benefit is there to creating some kind of artificial alliances? Sound good, but let's be clear, some trade barriers around chips, I'm not sure we really get anything from it. So my sense is this would be self-defeating.
I always, in my head, I'm trying to work out what goes on between, or how the world is going to start to apply, I guess, the proprietary stuff, the frontier, then we've got the open source, and then the open weight. And it does feel that part of my personal thesis is watching out for local deployment, which would effectively mean open source, not open weight, because if it's Chinese, you don't know what data's gone in and you don't have the full access. But I think there's going to be a very interesting play over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years as to what goes on-prem, what gets built, open source, how things kind of get brought into an organization, as opposed to what is using the latest and greatest frontier model. And I'm more erring to big orgs, and this might go back to the Accenture piece. I don't know if you got any thoughts on this, Mads, but people building and bringing stuff in-house and owning, and it being more secure and faster on the SLM side. And anyway, I'm starting to waffle, but does that resonate, or does that make you kick back?
No. People will increasingly be tuning their own open weight models. I mean, Cursor, before the acquisition by SpaceX, they built their own coding model on the back of Kimi K2, and it was a formidable model, right?
Yeah.
So you have an existing model, which is an exceptional model, and you then fine tune that using all the data Cursor had on coding, and they were able to stand up a really, really strong model. Now, of course, you could say they're already kind of at the leading edge of this, but many of our companies are fine tuning and developing their own models based on the back of open source. So this stuff is happening today.
We'll see more of this as the application layers start to pile through. We'll see much more and more of this.